Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Fatboyz Dynasty Podcast. Coming at you live, as always, Bo and Brant. Coming at you on the FantasyHolics Podcast Network. This show is a production of the FantasyHolics Podcast Network. Obviously, we took a week off last week, Brant. Normal day that records Wednesday, Valentine's Day, Super Bowl hangover was real. So we thought we'd come back a little early this week on Monday, as we're putting this out February 19th. So we really haven't got a chance to talk on air, at least, about what happened in the Super Bowl. We've got some important dates that we're going to talk about, with the NFL offseason. Then we're going to play another little game this week. The Fatboyz have been playing some games here recently.
Yeah, absolutely. The Super Bowl was a good one, definitely to watch. And like you said, we'll break that down here shortly. And then this week, I'm going to come at you with you did a Who's Who game last week, and I'm going to come at you with a little smoke and mirrors, a little a preview of back of what some players outperformed their ADP last year. And let's see if we think they were just popping smoke on us or if they'll mirror that image next year and where or what we would give up for them.
Sure. Okay. All right. Well, Brant, I think we're going to go ahead and jump right into this episode today. I think we'll go ahead and start off talking about a little bit about the Super Bowl. And I don't know about you, but I ate a lot during the Super Bowl. My bib may still be on, but if they're not on, let's get them on.
Let's get our bibs on and let's eat.
All right, so let's go ahead and start this episode off, Brant. Let's talk about it. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. We had what was a pretty much defensive battle first half of the Super Bowl to a fourth quarter where there were some points put up on the board. Then we go into overtime, and we see Patrick Mahomes get his third ring with the Kansas City Chiefs. Is it fair to say Pat is officially in the greatest of all time conversation, Brant?
Yeah, he definitely should be in that conversation. He's ever since he's been announced the starter in Kansas City, he's been in the AFC Championship game every single year. He's been in what I think it was 5 Super Bowls. I could be wrong with my numbers. He's got 3 rings already. He definitely is worth talking about in that conversation. And he's definitely done it. He's done it with a great supporting coach. I would say staff, but really it's been Kelsey's been the only consistent thing through those Super Bowls. So yeah, you definitely got to start talking about him in that conversation.
Absolutely agreed. And then another part of it that on the flip side is you've now got Kyle Shanahan as the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers to have blown double-digit scoring leads in every single one of those games. Brant, what do you make of Kyle Shanahan as a head coach?
Well, it's crazy because they had to make 2 outstanding comebacks to get that far into the Super Bowl, and then he kind of chokes it away in the Super Bowl. It's just what's going on? Why can't he finish it? You can't say it's because he doesn't use his running game. He has the best running back in the NFL there, and he rushed the ball 22 times. So it's not that he didn't use the running game. It's just, I don't know what it is. He just can't close it out the right way. And it's unfortunate because in my mind, he's been the head coach of some of the greatest teams to go into the Super Bowl, and he just can't finish it off.
If it comes out as true, I know there's been a lot of smoke at this point about him not having his 49er players knowing the overtime rules correctly. That would be a pretty big blunder as well, if there does end up being any truth to that. I don't know if I like the firing of the DC as soon as the Super Bowl was over, who really kind of kept the clamps on Patrick Mahomes, and that San Fran defense was good all year. I'm not a Kyle Shanahan fan, as you can assume, Brant, because of what happened in 2016. Just run the ball with Devonta Freeman, and I have a Super Bowl championship that I've gotten to witness. But so, of course, I was rooting against him. And then, the scapegoat of the DC afterwards just left a bad taste in my mouth. So
yeah, I don't get it because, like you said, he kept the clamps decently on Patrick Mahomes. The running game, I mean, you're talking 18 rushes for Pacheco for 59 yards. The leading rusher was Mahomes. You pretty much shut down that running game for a 5-quarter game that we did see. And you got an interception on Mahomes. I mean, you can't keep Mahomes down. He went 34-46. So he did have good good line. But you can't hate on your defensive coordinator. They did everything they could. It just seemed to be that secondary that just couldn't get it done. And I don't think that's on the DC. I think it's the secondary.
Absolutely. Overall, it was a good game, Brant. I think those of you who like defensive football, you got to see a little bit of that. Those of you that like offensive, you get to see that. People that were just there for the commercials and the halftime show were happy this year. It was one of the better Super Bowls in recent memory for me. So definitely a good contest. Definitely enjoyed watching this one.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a good contest. We kept the kids involved with some bingo. So it was definitely a good, fun time too.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about some of these off-season dates that are going to happen here this offseason that are going to have some importance that is going to draw you back in, because we all know football's over. We have 29 Sundays in a row without football at this point, NFL football, I guess. But the saving grace is there's things that draw us back a little bit here and there, right? So I do want to preface this by saying all these dates that we're going to talk about, if you want up-to-the-minute news coverage on all these, make sure you're paying attention to that FantasyHolics Facebook page. Those guys are beating out a lot of big names on Twitter. Those guys are beating out a lot of updates that you get from Sleeper, ESPN, things of that nature. So FantasyHolics Facebook page and the website is your one-stop shop for all things NFL. So make sure you have liked and have subscribed to that page.
Yeah, absolutely. And the website's getting going right now too. The FantasyHolics website, which you can find through the Facebook page. They're definitely on top of a lot of things, getting information out. And the off season, if you really look at it, almost starts tomorrow. I'm going to kick it off with the first date. Franchise tag time is officially open as of tomorrow.
Yeah, and there's some big names out there. We've already seen speculation on T. Higgins potentially getting franchise tagged. There's Danielle Hunter may get franchise tagged. Josh Allen out of Jacksonville, the edge rusher there. So there's some big names. Saquon Barkley could be tagged again. So there's definitely names to be mindful of that have some fantasy implications there. And the tag window opens tomorrow. It does close March 5th. For teams to place that tag. Now there's a later date for players to sign those, but that's when the deadline passes. So if T. Higgins isn't tagged by the 5th, then it starts to get really interesting, right, Brant?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of these names. So by March 5th, we should know who's really going into the free agency pool and see what kind of names are actually out there.
Absolutely. And then we kind of moved straight on into the NFL Combine. On the 29th, we have defensive linemen and linebackers. March 1st is defensive backs and tight ends. March 2nd is quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and March 3rd is offensive linemen. So there's some combine dates for you. And then the thing that I think a lot of us get excited for, Brant, I know you're up there with me. We usually are at work when it happens, but we're glued to ESPN. Is March 13th or March 11th through the 13th, you get your legal tampering for the NFL free agency period, moving into the new league year on March 13th when players are allowed to officially sign that dotted line.
Absolutely. Those between the combine and the legal tampering is the time to really get excited and start to do your research for your rookie drafts and then so on and so forth of redraft of seeing where these new players fall.
Right. And then April 1st, you and I both get to pay attention to April 1st this year. Teams with a new head coach get to begin off-season workouts on the 1st. Every other team can report for off-season workouts on the 15th of April. So definitely some big dates there. And then that leads us right into Christmas for NFL teams. April 25th through the 27th, we have the NFL draft, Brant. So there should definitely be some busy times happening here between tomorrow of the 20th all the way up until, the day before. We'll see some trades probably happen. It'll be interesting to see what Chicago does with their picks. So we got some stuff coming there, which Last year we had live coverage of the draft with your boots on the ground. I think this year you and I will probably cover the draft live, but there won't be a Fat Boy in attendance this year.
No, I avoid Detroit like the plague. Nothing against the Lions. I just don't think I'm the guy to be up there in Detroit. So I will be boots on my own ground here in a house during those dates. I'll be excited. I'll be glued to the TV, definitely ready to be watching it.
Absolutely. May 2nd is the deadline for teams to pick up the 5th-year option for rookie contracts. Those players selected in the first round. Again, there'll be some big names there. And then early May is expected to be the full schedule release. So we can start talking about matchups that we really like. We'll be able to see who's playing overseas at what games. I know we know some of the home teams for those away overseas games, but we got to figure out their opponents for some of those as well. Late May, early June, OTAs will begin for a lot of these teams. And then mid to late July, you'll start seeing training camps open. So really, again, there's a very short off season. If you really aren't a diehard NFL fan, you can probably get by with sleeping on football from the Super Bowl until the draft, the NFL draft, but then it picks up and steam starts rolling, Brant.
Absolutely. And once that draft really hits, it just rolls. It just rolls. And the next thing you know, you're in preseason games, you're getting into your fantasy drafts, and then all of a sudden the season's back. So absolutely, the times will just start rolling, and it'll be back before you know it.
It will. It certainly will. It felt like it was super short this year. I remember last offseason, I just couldn't wait. And then it felt like it was like, man, it's already week 10. Man, it's already week 15. We're almost over. But we had a great playoffs this year. Everything was good. So it was a good season. Can't wait till next year, Brant.
Absolutely.
Let's get into this smoke and mirrors, if you will, a little bit here. And just to set the table, last week, or 2 weeks ago, last episode, I'm sorry, I kind of come at you. You had no time really to do any research except for to look at like needy teams for each position. And you were kind of blindsided. I put you on the spot, talked about whether you still liked them or not. We're going to do something very similar with that, except for you're going to come at me. You've got all the research done today. I'm sitting here with no idea who you're getting ready to come at me with. And I'll try to put a trade package together to acquire the player at the end of it. And we'll see what happens, Brant.
Okay, so we talked about the Super Bowl. Let's talk about the new Gabe Davis. That's Rashee Rice. Amazing playoff run. Round one, he saw 12 targets, 8 receptions, 130 yards. Round two, he was 4 for 4, 47 yards. Round three, 8 of 9 for 46 yards. He had a touchdown in the wild card round. And then he went 6 of 8 in the Super Bowl. That's Rashee Rice. He was drafted at He was drafted as the wide receiver number 56. He finished as wide receiver number 27, averaging 13.3 points per game. He had 102 targets, 79 receptions, 938 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's 23 years old. And like I said, I call him the Gabe Davis of this year because he blew up in the playoffs. He looked so phenomenal in the playoffs. I know not as many receivers in the playoffs, but he was top 10 wide receiver every single week in the playoffs. So this guy, and I have an average estimated ADP of a top 15 wide receiver in a startup draft at 23 years old. What do you think? Do you think he can mirror this, or do you think it was all just smoke?
Okay, so I'm going to say, first of all, this is 100% a mirror for me, and you know I have a lot of love for Rashee Rice. This was a player I acquired in our main dynasty league halfway through the season. So for me, again, it's a lot of factors that he's going to mirror this. One, he's tied to Patrick Mahomes, right? And Andy Reid. Hopefully, Andy Reid doesn't, retire into the land of the cheeseburgers after that Super Bowl win. How about them nuggies? But yes, again, tied to Patrick Mahomes. Travis Kelce's not getting any younger, right? And yes, it was a dominant playoff stretch for him, but he really had a good couple weeks. Probably 6-7 weeks prior to the start of the playoffs, he started becoming a go-to guy for Mahomes. And the problem is Sky Moore had his chance, never did anything with it. MVS was sporadic at best. McCole Hardman was rarely used. So it was really kind of Kelce, Pacheco, and Rashee Rice as the main guys down the stretch. And again, I think coming into next year, I do think there's probably some new names added to that wide receiving core, obviously, but I think that actually helps Rashee Rice as far as the production that he's able to do, because he should operate in more space if there's another target out there. But to me, he's a comfortable buy at 15th. I don't know if he starts getting into the top 10 wide receiver range in a startup if I want him. But in the top 15, I think he's a comfortable buy for me, Brant. And again, like as far as a trade package, I was able to package Derrick Henry and get Rashee Rice in a second round draft pick in the trade I did with him this offseason. Now, granted, that was before he blew up this season. So that was obviously a little different. I imagine nowadays you'd probably have to do Derrick Henry in the second on the giving end to get a guy like Rashee Rice. But I mean, this year's a wide receiver laden draft class. If you really want Rashee Rice, I think it costs you a back half first round, honestly. I think that's about where I'm at with this in a rookie draft. If you don't like, Keon Coleman or, Xavier Worthy or any of those later first round wide receivers that are coming out in this draft class, I think it probably cost you one of those to go take a gamble on a guy like Rashee Rice.
Okay, absolutely. I definitely think this is a buy spot here. I do think he's going to be one of the targets, one of the main trade targets. I do think they add a name, but I don't think they add a big name. I think they try to address some other needs prior to adding another wide receiver. So I'll stick to that. I'm going to stick to that position group with wide receivers. And let's go with Puka Nacua. He was drafted outside the top 50 wide receiver. Every single wide receiver on his team almost was drafted above him. Van Jefferson was there prior, Tutu Atwell was drafted before him, and then you had Puka Nacua outside the top 50. He finished as wide receiver 4, averaging 17 points per game. He had 105 receptions, 1,486 yards, 6 touchdowns on 160 targets. He's 22 years old. I have an estimated ADP of, this is what I think where he's going to end up, late first, early second round draft pick, because I do think that a lot of people are going to be feasting on this.
Yeah, so I think, Brant, here's the problem with this for me. I'm going to say it's smoke because of the fact that I think what we saw last year was his ceiling. I think he's extremely talented. I think he caught a lot of people off guard last year. A lot of people, like, he was a 4th round rookie pick in our draft and was the pick of the draft. I mean, honestly. But I think the NFL world as well as fantasy world is going to catch up to him a little bit this year. I think that was great production from him. But man, you just had the Rams coaching staff just absolutely pillaged. There's going to be some turnover there. They don't have the draft capital to really add a whole lot. I do think Puka Nacua is still extremely relevant. I don't know if I would pay a first round draft pick for him. I could see myself doing a second rounder depending on where I was at in the second, just because, again, he is talented. I do think it's replicable, but I don't think it's something that you should aim for saying, well, that's the baseline. I think last year what we saw was the ceiling. Again, I still think this is a guy who's got a chance to be a top 12 wide receiver, potentially every season, but I don't know if I could draft him in the first round.
Okay. That's funny because I honestly thought this was going to be the one that we were going to have the difference. I was going to call smoke on this because just like you said, he hit the NFL by surprise. He hit the ground running with a huge week 1 against my Seahawks. And the Rams caught everybody off guard this year. Like you said, the coaching staff has been picked through. That's Rams is starting to make their turnover, and you're not sure where Puka is going to fall in line with that. I do think that he will have some good productive seasons. I just don't think he's going to mirror this at all. So I believe it's all smoke too.
Here's the problem with this too, Brant, is as far as putting together a trade offer for the Puka Nacua owners right now, good luck, because if you got him and the guy who got him in our league in the 4th round of our rookie startup draft, it's a free player for the rest of my career to say, look at this guy, look what he did. You can't overpay me enough. I'm thinking you're talking. Let me ask you, Brant. Okay, so assuming that the rookie draft, okay, is in a standard whatever league that Marvin Harrison is off the board and Malik Neighbors is off the board, and you have the 3rd pick in your hand. If you're the Puka Nacua owner and somebody says, hey, I'll give you the 3rd, So at best, you're getting Roma Doozy or Brock Bowers or whatever running back you like. Are you taking that or are you keeping Puka?
I think I'm going to keep Puka there because as of right now, landing spot could change my mind. But if that was, we're sitting down today, I'm keeping Puka because as of right now, there's not another wide receiver barring landing spot that I would fall in love with. Like I do like him there because I think he could take over the Cup role.
Yeah, so for me, it would have to be you'd have to be able to guarantee me either Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. for me to even entertain moving Puka at this point. And again, if you're sitting in the place to draft Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors, you're probably not making that offer in the first place. So again, I think it'd be really tough to get Puka Nacua right now just because he is young, how the cost was fairly cheap. Again, if your league only does 2-round draft picks, Brant, like mine does, Puka Nacua was undrafted. Or not mine. And one of the leagues I'm a part of, one of the dynasties, he didn't get drafted because it was 2 rounds. So I mean, again, it's just one of those things that you're going to have to overpay to get a guy like him. I don't know if I want to overpay. Again, if I could get him at market cost, I'm probably okay with that. But it overpay, I'm not doing.
Absolutely. You'd have to almost be able to guarantee me he's going to replicate his numbers and Cooper Kupp's numbers for the next 4 years for me to overpay for him.
Mm-hmm.
So next one is moving on to different position group. That's Rachaad White. Wow, just completely butchered that up. He's drafted as running back 24. He finished as RB4. White averaged 15 points per game in PPR. He had 272 attempts, 990 rushing yards, 6 TDs, 64 receptions, 549 receiving yards, and 3 more touchdowns. He's 25 years old. I have him as an estimated ADP of a mid to late second round draft pick because a lot of people will be looking at him as a top 10 back. Is this guy one of the last remaining workhorse backs in the NFL?
So I'm going to call this production mirrors. I do think he's good enough to repeat what we saw last year, Brant. And I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers kind of found a recipe for success last year with Baker Mayfield. Here's the problem for me. Where the problem lies is they've got a very good offensive line, so the running lane should still be there. The problem is if Mike Evans is allowed to leave town and Chris Godwin is the one you're able to bring Baker Mayfield back, does that stack the box against this team to where these running lanes are not there? Or I don't know. For me, I think he's very capable of doing what he did. I think he could be better. I think there could be more touchdown equity for him in the future. I know we saw him in person last year, and he was impressive in that game against the Falcons. But I think it's Mears. He's a guy that I'm sorry, where did you say your estimated draft was, Capital?
Mid to late second round pick. I think he's looked as.
I'm probably pairing him with that. Again, if it's a mid to late, that means you're either getting a CMC, a Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, somebody like that in the first round, Justin Jefferson, and then this is the guy you're pairing them with on the turn. You're going to get another player right there in the beginning of the third round. I think that's a comfortable area for me. As far as a trade goes, Brant, again, you're coming at me with youth in a dynasty league. It'd be really hard to go get these guys because he's young and the production's there. So again, I think this is a first round pick that it's going to cost to go get, and it probably going to have to be a decently high first round pick if it's a player trading for him based on a necessity, because there's no running backs in this class that are going to come close to what Rachaad White offers, at least not initially. So I think you're talking a top 5 pick in this year's draft, probably. And I think you're probably going to have to add a little something to it, potentially. Like, if you've got an aging back on your roster, a top 5 pick, and then, a Gus Edwards, something like that, maybe. Devin Singletary, one of those guys that performed a little bit. But again, that's good luck getting me to respond to a trade if you come at me with trying to get Rachaad White off of me. I don't know. That's a tough one to be in there.
Yeah, I'm probably not moving off him if I'm the owner of Rashad White. He's one of the best guys that was out there. I think he is one of the last remaining workhorses. I don't think they addressed that. I know they just had their center retire. So I think they're going to draft that or address that in free agency. And then they'll address some of the defense because I think that was their downfall this year a little bit. So getting me to move off him, you would have to pay me almost, a top tier pick.
Mm-hmm.
But trading wise, yeah, I'd probably give up a top 5 for him easily if that's the offer. Because you're not going to find another back that's going to replicate this at the moment. I mean, odds are there could be a chance that somebody lands in Tennessee where Derrick Henry's out of town right now. And then maybe we could talk about that depending who it is.
Sure.
So my last one is another guy that I know that you like. So I think you're going to say Mears on this one. And I'm a little skeptical on this one here. That's Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. Drafted as tight end 28. He finished as tight end 7. He averaged 10 points per game. I know it doesn't sound like that much, but think about the tight end position. He had 106 targets, 81 receptions, 825 yards, 3 TDs. I have him estimated draft as a top 5 tight end. Don't really have any rounds for it because, like we talked, we don't know how tight ends really fall in some drafts. He is 24 years old, and he played with 18 different quarterbacks this year throughout the entire year or something like that.
I am going to say this is Mears Brant. It's for a pretty juicy reason, and that's Marquise Hollywood Brown's a free agent, so you could be coming back next year with the Arizona Cardinals having Rondale Moore and Michael Wilson as their 1-2 wide receivers, which instantly puts Trey McBride as the best target on the field. Now, again, they could add a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Malik Neighbors. That those guys fit the draft needs of that team. But that doesn't bother me much. If you look at the production from Trey McBride when Kyler Murray came back, that's really when his production started to pick up. I do think you'll have a healthy Kyler Murray for a better portion of the season next year than did this year. So I do think Trey McBride's – I don't think we've scratched the surface with Trey McBride, if I'm being honest, Brant. The touchdown equity is going to go up. He's too good. He's complete. He's got all the skills that you want out of a tight end. He may not be that flashy, what we saw out of Sam Laporta, or ever get to a Travis Kelce, but I think this guy could be a Mark Andrews type tight end where he's the leading target guy for his team on a run first-esque or rolling out a quarterback picking up those yards himself kind of a team. But I do think Trey McBride, I think he could be better than where he was this year. And all that takes really is him doubling his touchdowns, going from 3 to 6. And you're talking about him climbing the ranks as a tight end.
Okay. I think mine's a little bit of the same here. I'm going to say it's Smoke and a Mirror. I think he mirrors this next year, if not a little bit better production. But if Arizona doesn't improve, this is why I say it could also be Smoke. I could see this being a complete overhaul from the front office down, starting not next season, but the year following when everybody's healthy. If they don't get better and improve, I could see this being a complete overhaul. Then you got a new quarterback coming in, new head coach coming in. Trey McBride could be a guy taking a back seat here shortly. I do think he's talented enough to mirror it next year, but I do believe that it's Smoke because I don't think Arizona has enough on their roster to compete. So I think you're going to see a complete overhaul. And then you got to start looking at, okay, does this coach use tight ends? What's his history like? Does he only want blockers? So I do think it's a little bit of Smoke. I think you can get one more mirror. And I honestly think when you come down to talking about trade packages, I think we'll be talking about a trade package for him next year on how to sell off on him when Arizona is doing a whole recall.
So this is interesting. What if Arizona puts him up for a trade in Kansas City? He's like, well, our tight end, Travis Kelce, just retired. We need a new one. Oh, here's a 5th-round draft pick for him. And Arizona's like, oh, sure. And then you've got Trey McBride with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. So, I mean, he definitely fits that profile. So, yeah, I see what you're saying because, the situation in Arizona could be so bad. But I do believe, and I'd have to be corrected on this, I did look into Kyler Murray a little bit this offseason or late in the season, wondering if he was an option as a trade for the Falcons. He's pretty well guaranteed to be on Arizona's roster for, I believe 2 more full seasons at the very least before his contract's even remotely close to cuttable. So definitely could be some continuity there to be able to be built. But yeah, you're right. Head coach could change again. GM could change. It could definitely flip the script on some things and make his value cattywampus. So I guess maybe he's a sell high if he goes off again this year. If you don't believe in Arizona, but so to go get him this year, just because the tight end position brand evolved so much this year. You had Travis Kelce kind of come back to the pack. And then you had Sam Laporta, Dalton Kincaid, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews. All these guys have really good seasons. David Njoku. I think it really probably brought down the trade market on tight ends a decent amount, unless you play in a tight end premium league. So I'm betting you could probably go after Trey McBride with a 2nd-round rookie pick if that was something you're wanting to do, or like a low-end wide receiver 3, potentially. I don't want to necessarily throw out any names, but I'm trying to think about, maybe a Rashid Shaheed type wide receiver. Just off the top of my head, I'm throwing out names of guys that, maybe Mike Williams is a prime example there. Quentin Johnston potentially, maybe. So you want to let somebody else wants to take a gamble on, that production increasing, and you want to go after the tight end. So that, there's names out there. Jacoby Myers would probably be another good flip for Trey McBride. So, or the aforementioned Tyler Lockett that we've talked about a couple times already on this show that's undervalued. Those could be all good pieces to throw out for a Trey McBride trade.
Absolutely could be. Tyler Boyd's another name that you could probably start thinking about. So there are definitely names to get out there and go get him. But I think he'll be a sell high starting next year. But we'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. We definitely will indeed have to do that, Brant. So I think that pretty well wraps up this week's episode. We'll be back again. Should be back next week, same time, same place, or back to our normal time, place on Wednesdays. And we'll probably have to talk about some franchise tags that have happened and what that does to value and what it does to the market. We'll get something interesting out to you guys next week. Probably try to stay away from a game for a couple of weeks since we went back to back here. But I make no promises because the Fatboyz like to play games.
Absolutely. But as always, stay hungry
and stay fat, my friends.